The man who helped design John Howard's GST and Kevin Rudd's mining tax tonight delivered his last public address as a bureaucrat. But it's not Treasury Secretary Ken Henry's style to leave quietly, and in his speech delivered at the University of Tasmania, he wondered aloud whether Australia's reform era was at an end. Political correspondent Tom Eagleton reports.
Ken Henry's never been backward in coming forward right from the get-go as Treasury Secretary. His first speech was aimed at journalists and market commentators.
Sensationalism sells. If it didn't, we'd have much less of it. But I'd ask you to ponder how much good it's doing to the reputation of your profession.
10 years later, he's still at it.
Even though it's my last public address, there's yet time to get sacked.
Not that that was going to stop him from making one of his famously frank assessments of the political process.
But I do sense there's not the same sense of urgency today amongst our politicians as there was in the 1980s. There is, I think, a sense of complacency in the broader community that hasn't put the political system under as much stress as it felt itself under in the 1980s.
And he says the global financial crisis may have robbed Australia of the opportunity to do the sort of reforms he helped design in the 1980s.
And one of the ideas that came out of the 2020 summit, and it was the Australian business community that came up with the idea, was that, well, you know, maybe this is an historic opportunity to purchase, and I use that term quite deliberately, to purchase major tax reform. 6 months later, it had all gone. That opportunity to deliver large-scale tax reform with a significant hit on the budget, it had all disappeared. And it's not at all clear, I have to say, when that fiscal opportunity may present itself.
And he's calling for other reforms too, if the country's to deal with a growing population to feed the demand for more workers in the country's booming mining sector.
A sustainable population for Australia, well, I don't know, maybe 15 million, something like that. That's 1.5, not 5.0. It's evident in the environmental degradation that one sees, the loss of biodiversity, species extinction and so on. It's very clear that the population growth that we've experienced to date to give us a population of 21, 22 million has not been sustainable population growth in that sense.
Ken Henry was never the kind of Treasury Secretary who was going to be satisfied by a narrow interest in the national accounts. As arguably Canberra's most powerful bureaucrat over the last decade, he was regularly drawn into the political debate. He called John Howard's water strategy bad in a speech to his department and was accused of providing overly rosy economic forecasts to Wayne Swan.
These forecasts were produced by the Treasury with no political manipulation. I don't think it's helpful that comments like that are made which have the potential of undermining the integrity of the Australian public service.
But the accusations that he'd lost his impartiality grew louder from the Conservative side of politics.
These discrepancies are starting to really bring into question the independence of whether Dr Henry is a political player.
Those tensions reached a peak in a newspaper article about advice he'd supposedly given the government about guaranteeing bank deposits.
The story on the front page of yesterday's Australian newspaper was wrong. That's W-R-O-N-G.
But his denials didn't satisfy his detractors.
That to me doesn't sound to have the ring of truth about it.
I'm sorry, Senator, what are you suggesting?
He was never afraid to stand up to power, including the mining industry, furious at the mining tax he designed for Kevin Rudd. But as the Secretary departs, what's likely to be his biggest legacy is still a work in progress. A committed lover of Australian fauna, his favourite animal gave him inspiration for perhaps his most important contribution as a public servant.
Turns out there are more taxes in Australia than there are northern hairy-nosed wombats. Taxes in Australia are not an endangered species.
The Henry Tax Review is expected to inform the political debate for decades to come. Tom Eagleton, Lateline.